So if you want to move fast in the industry, if you want to goes into a more senior position, you want to develop your career, you have to look around to see what is happening. Everything happening in the industry has something to do with food science, with quality control, with operations. And if you want to be an operations or plant manager, you have to know how a bag of, say, granola or any product is produced.
Welcome to episode 3 of the Food Grads Podcast, the podcast where we interview professionals in the food, beverage, and hospitality industries from farm to fork. I'm your host, Veronica Hislop, a molecular science graduate student and career partner with Food Grads. On this week's podcast, we interviewed Sean Xia, Clear Ocean Seafood Limited's Manager of Operations and Quality. Clear Ocean Seafood, established in Vancouver, BC, Canada, is an importer, wholesaler, and custom packer of premium quality frozen seafood products. Clear Ocean's primary product lines include frozen sea scallops, bay scallops, scallops on the half shell, and a range of other products, which include bacon wrapped scallops, something we talk about on the show. On this episode, we learn about Sean's career journey from master's degree to manager, and more about Clear Ocean Seafood. We dive into the world of scallops and learn about the journey that they take growing in the ocean to when they reach the supermarket shelves. Also, we learn about what Sean learned during his journey going from master's degree to a full-time position in the industry. You can tell that Sean deeply loves his job and the people that he works with. He has a strong understanding of the whole system of manufacturing and how creating a food product is truly a team effort. Sean gives a lot of useful advice for students that you can tell comes from his own journey. I really enjoyed learning about how he believes that the industry can make you grow as a person because it helps you build confidence through talking with others. So I'm looking forward to sharing this episode with you. Now, on to the show. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today. I'm really excited to learn more about your career. So could you first start by introducing yourself and telling everyone where you work?
Okay, my name is Sean. I'm currently working as operations manager at Clear Ocean Seafood in Richmond, BC. I started work there about 5 years ago. I started my position there as a QA manager. I slowly moved into more operational sides. Yeah, I also started my own trading business recently in food industry as well.
Okay.
Yeah, that's basically what I'm currently doing right now.
What does Clear Ocean Seafood actually do, or what's their type of products?
We're doing scallops. So basically, we are importer of scallops and other seafood. We have a manufacturing plant in British Columbia doing repackaging, co-packing, doing bacon wrapped scallops, and some other products. We have our 2 plants back in China and 1 plant in Japan doing the aquaculture of the scallops. Yeah, we basically import the products and process locally in Richmond and redistribute the products to all the provinces in Canada and also to the United States.
So it seems like the company is really from the ocean to the processing facility. I wish I could have been having some of your scallops the other day. I was eating actually bacon wrapped scallops as a treat, and they're one of my favorite things to eat, but they're not something I get to eat as often as I would like. So maybe I'll have to check out yours another time.
No problem. I will send you some.
I would absolutely. Oh, my parents would be so jealous of me. So you said that you worked you work as a manager in operations. So what is that role about? So, for example, what are some of your daily duties that you would perform?
Yeah, operation is a very broad concept. Basically what I do is that I will work on wherever I need to be. Basically, whenever there's a problem, there's an issue, that will be my job to resolve it. No matter if it's a purchasing issue or it's a hiring issue. Basically, my it's not a routine thing, like per se. Basically, for the regular work, I'm in charge of purchasing of the material. So that's the day-to-day work I have to deal with. I'm looking at my inventory, look at my production plans to purchase the material that they need to use. And besides that, I will need to work with the production manager to scheduling the production plan for the last month, and also to planning for the labor force for each day to accomplish the work and have a backup plan in case anything happens. I work with the marketing department to determine what are the new opportunities in the market, and we can develop a new product. Work with the QA and the new product development technician to see if we can set up some new products to increase sales, things like that. It's not like I have a list of things I have to do every day. Every day is different. Depends on what the issue comes up on that particular day, what are the current focus of the company as a whole in terms of the strategy.
So it really sounds like you have a position where you get to explore so many parts of the organization and you get to deal with everything, which really gives you an overall view of everything that sounds like that's going on in your operation. So it sounds like you get to keep things fresh and there's always something new to learn, if I'm correct, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. So because of that, what are some of the things that I'm assuming, because there's a lot of variety, that's something that you love about your job, but what are some aspects that you personally love about what you do?
The thing I love most in terms of my job is that to set up a new line that sells. So basically for example, we usually at the beginning of the business we only do repackaging. We brought in different seafood in bulk and we repack into retail and distribute. We do not have the manufacturing process. After doing some market research, we found that there's a great potential for the bacon wrapped scallops in the market. There's still a lot of room for growth, and the capacity of our competitors are not nearly enough to fill all the demand on the market. And then we start to sit down and working on the process to figure out what we need to do to set up a new process. What are the vendors we need to find? How many workers we need to find? What are the potential customer we can approach? What are the expected investment we need to put in to set up this new line of production? And we do some work. We do some math, do some calculation to say what are expected sales and the return we can get from the plan. And everything looks beautiful on the paper, and we have to carry out the plan, and the plan works out. That's the most amazing thing about the job. When you see the plan you did a month ago actually carried out as you expected. That gives you a strong sense of accomplishment. Same thing as when you're doing a prediction of your inventory and your sales. I usually need to do a prediction of the sales and the inventory changes 3 months ahead of time. So basically, I do a last quarter's prediction. So each time, if my prediction almost exact as the actual sales, that made me really happy. Because that means I'm doing the right thing. I have considered all the aspects I need to consider about the business. I have been able to calculate all the variables into my calculation and get the system right. So that means that our company are not losing any money, not buying any obsolete inventory, and the sales are going to the right direction. So that made me really happy.
Yeah, that is an amazing experience. I know when I've never personally worked exactly in operations, but I have worked in quality assurance. And when I was in that position to help the company with a new product or something, when you see like the months of hard work go into that product finally comes out on the line, and when you see it in the store, you just can't help but be proud because you think of all the people who were involved in working on just this one product that's on the shelves, but there's just so much into it, and it's just, you can't help but feel proud. So congratulations on when you complete a product like that.
Thank you. Especially when you have to you have to go to the floor and do it yourself to lead the team. Sometimes you have to get your hands on the product, not just pointing fingers at others do it. When you saw a product, you say, okay, on the shelf, say, okay, that might be the bag I did myself. That's really an amazing feeling.
So it sounds like with your job, because you're in operations, you get to be hands-on and go down on the line and work with some of the frontline workers. How is that for you when you get to, what's the experience like when you get to go down and work with your staff on the front line?
I kind of enjoyed it, to be honest. When I'm working with when I'm on the line actually doing a labor work, so it gives me a feeling to get to understand why employees behave a certain way, what they care most during the production, what makes them work harder, what could make them happier, and what are the things disencourage them. So when I'm working with them, I'm always trying to talk with my staff to know, is there anything we can do to make your work more comfortable? Is there anything you think we can do to improve the product? And you'll be amazed how much knowledge they have about the process and the production, how many good ideas they can come up with. And those are all the ideas that are very practical. And most of those ideas that we can never think of just by sitting on a desk and just doing the theoretical calculations. So yeah, I kind of like it. A lot of my staff, they are very well educated, and they give me a lot of knowledge in terms of all aspects. Their views of they check during production, so their views of the world, their life, their interests. Get to know the people, help us to retain our workforce, also help us to promote the company as a whole. So I do like it.
That's good. Yeah, it's I think that's a misconception that a lot of people have about the industry, is that it's just really reliant on machines. But I think that there are so many valuable people that work in these organizations, especially on the floor, that they know what they're doing and they can give you so much insight that you just would never get working purely in the office. So
yeah, that's true.
I'm actually not that familiar with the processing that goes behind scallops going from the ocean to the supermarket. Could you maybe give me a little bit of a rundown about if you were just selling a wholesale, let's say, scallop that I could purchase in the store? How would that journey look like?
Yeah, okay. It's going to be a long journey.
Oh, no.
So
let's get started.
So you mentioned that a lot of people think that all the food industry are very automatic, with a lot of machinery involved in the process. But for safety industry, it's not necessarily the case, especially in terms of scallops or other bivalve mollusks. Basically, it's still a very labor-intensive process. So our company specialized in Japanese scallops and the Chinese-based scallops. Two scallops are both our cultural scallops. That means that every year in the spring, the farmers, they have to go to the open sea and start to seed the ocean. They put the scallop seed in either a cage or directly on the bottom of the ocean, and they start to feed the scallops, let them grow, and they have to check every week to see how fast it goes. For big scallops, up to 10 pieces per pound scallops you can get in the supermarket, it takes 5 years for scallops to grow from tiny seed to a scallop that is presentable at a restaurant or supermarket. So during that 5 years, a lot of things can happen. There can be red tide, there can be a storm. That if any natural disaster happens, that brings years of work, hard labor, and very challenging job that we have very good people working on site to make things doing right. After the scallops that grow into size, they are pulled out of the ocean and shipped to the plant. Usually the plant is just on the shore near where the scallops are farmed, and they have to be shucked 100% manually. So think it this way: we produce like over a million pounds of scallops a year, and every piece is shucked manually.
Wow.
That's a lot of scallops to be shucked.
That is
so that needs a lot of labor to do that. I went to the both plants, both in China and Japan. So it was amazing to see those employees to shuck a scallop. It takes them literally 2 seconds to shuck the scallops, remove the scallop roll and the mantle of the scallops, and get the meat out. 2 seconds.
That's amazing. That's so quick. Oh my gosh.
It's crazy. And the most amazing thing is that they will not leave a mark on the meat, because both our Chinese plant and Japanese plant, they have very high quality standard. They don't allow a damage a piece. Basically, if you shuck the scallops and the knife cuts the meat, make the scallop like there's a marks on the meat, it will be a defect. So 2 seconds, they shuck the scallops, the knife will be around the meat and no marks on the meat at all. The whole meat will be taken out of the scallop, go into the further process. That including rinsing, freezing, packaging, then ship. After everything is done, the scallops are packed. They had to travel 6 weeks from China to Canada, or 4 weeks from Japan to Canada. Yeah, the logistics is a very tedious process because there's so many different authorities that have to deal with to make a container cleared. And in Canada, there's a lot of things can happen. Say that if there's a strike at the port, or if there's a routine inspection at the customs, everything can happen, and that will delay our shipment. And once the shipment arrives in Canada, for bacon wrapped scallops, we would buy the bacon from Quebec and wrap the bacon on top of the scallops. That's a very slow process as well. So basically, one person can only do 8 pounds of finished products per hour, roughly. So that's a very slow process, again, very labor intensive. After that, the products are packed, shipped as all the products are to either the restaurants or the supermarket where you can buy a box of scallops. Yeah.
Wow. Hearing the process like that, it really makes sense why, because scallops are a premium type product in terms of pricing as well. So the price behind it makes total sense based on what you're saying, especially from traveling from another country and in the hand labor with how many steps that there are in the process. It's amazing how you're able to predict production even with something like this, or calculate the types of when you get a delay, for example, how that affects production. So that's amazing.
Yeah, that's very tricky. And also when dive into the industry, dive into, say, scallops, you'll be amazed how many different species and different things, different factors are involved in the scallop quality. The temperature of the seawater, the salt content of the seawater, for example, all affect the texture of the scallop. Some make it firmer, some make it softer. And there are different standards. Again, we do Japanese scallops, so they have like sashimi grade scallops and they have non-sashimi grade scallops. And the different cuisine requires different properties of the scallop. Even for scallops, same species, same country of origin, they have different products for different cuisine. For mainstream market, they require like a former scallop. than a Japanese market. And a Japanese sushi chef will require certain aspects. It had to meet a certain flavor profile. You would think a scallop is scallop, all scallops the same, but it is not. So really interesting.
I guess your quality team really has outlines or protocols in place to understand the different grading and make sure that you don't get any mix-ups in the plant, for example.
Yeah, I had to be. So we had to control the season, the exact time of the purchase. So basically, all the year round, you can get scallops. But every month, you will get different scallops. So the scallop you buy in summer will be completely different than a scallop you can buy in winter. Yeah.
That makes sense. Wow. That's so cool. I mean, I'm going to definitely look at my scallop in a different way when I purchase some more.
Yeah.
So I actually am going to switch the conversation a little bit more back to you in terms of your career and such. I saw that you did a master's degree at the University of British Columbia. First of all, I'm doing my master's degree, so congratulations on getting published. I know how much hard work it is, and I'm slowly working towards that right now. I wanted to know, because I saw that you graduated with a master's, and then you moved to SGS as a laboratory technician. How was the journey transitioning between going from academia to a full-time job position?
Oh, well, it's a lot of hard work to start with. Well, I hate to say this, but like I'm also doing some mentoring job in UBC right now. I always tell students, like, food industry has a very low entry point. Basically, you don't need to be a master or a bachelor to enter the industry to be a QC or a lab technician. So you will be competing with someone graduated from high school who are just trained for a certain job. So remember, that's the entry level job you'll be getting. I hate to say that I don't have the expectation too high in terms of the first job you can get or the compensation of the first job you can get. My first job at SGS, it was a lab technician, but it was like super junior position. So basically, I had to do all the hard work. So, for example, if they need to carry some heavy samples from a sample room to a lab, it is my job to carry those stuff.
Oh, wow.
And I started with minimum wage, so to be honest, just to enter the position. And some of my friends I know, they even do a voluntary job just to enter industry. Because for this industry, especially when you have a master's degree, the growth is very fast. But the most challenging part is to get the first step into industry, to start to accumulate. I guess it's for all industry. It is to start to accumulate your experience. So, yeah, the first job usually tend to be kind of repetitive. No matter if you are doing a lab work or doing a QC job, most people want to start a job as a manager right away, because most people just freshly graduated from university and not knowing the industry. I see students from UBC that don't know what a forklift is. So I told them, if you don't know what a forklift is, you cannot be a manager, because you are not knowing anything about industry yet. You have to learn on the side. You have to start with basic work to get to comprehend what is really happening in the food facility. So when I had my first job in SGS, it's a laboratory work, and the daily work is fairly repetitive in terms of the testing. The thing I learned most from SGS is that SGS is a great company. It's a multinational global company. So they have a lot of established procedures and a lot of great training materials. So that's the things that I was able to learn from them, how a global company has structured their training program, what are the the protocols and the SOPs they have in place. That's I think I was able to learn when I take advantage my time working there. So the job itself doesn't really give me the opportunity to have a hands-on experience with all the procedure, to writing the procedures or manage anyone in SGS. But I was able to see people doing the stuff. And this is another thing I always told the students, that no matter what job you get for your first job in the industry, it is not about the job you are doing. It's about the things happening around you. So if you want to move fast in the industry, if you want to go into a more senior position, you want to develop your career, you have to look around to see what is happening. Everything happening in the industry has something to do with food science, with quality control, with operations. And if you want to be an operations or plant manager, you have to know how a bag of, say, a granola or any product is produced. Then you have to watch the worker to actually produce the whole product from beginning to the end, and even have your hand on the process to understand it. And only when you understand it, you can think of, okay, maybe I was able to supervise this work. Yeah, I think that's the mindset everyone should have when they first go into this industry. Yeah, that's my comment on my on the job. Yeah.
No, but
sorry, I've been rambling too much.
No, don't be. I think that are some really valuable insights that you're giving in here, because I know that, as a student, sometimes have an ideal of not going into this entry position because you've been going to school for that, and I think that there's so much value in the starting positions, for example, like going into quality control. For some people, that is a lifelong career, but for others, it is a stepping stone. And sometimes the repetitive nature of the work is actually to your benefit, because once you can get a really good handle on what you're doing, it allows you more time to focus on some other things going on around you, because you're not so focused on how do I do my own job. And once you know how to, you can see what's going on in the production facility. Because you're right, I think that going into, when you're learning about food science in school, you're focused on the product itself, and about learning how to make HACCP plans and even things like that. But when you go into the facility, and the warehouse is such a key component of a facility, and knowing how forklift works, like that is the environment that you're in. It's not, there's a lot of dynamics moving around in a plant, and you have to watch kind of where you're going. So being able to go into your first position ready to learn is really important for the growth of your career.
So you have to be proactive. So sometimes I notice that they can turn to be ashamed to ask questions, especially the basic questions like why are you selling these bags this way? Why are you packing products this way? This basic question, sometimes I have practicum students coming to my plants every year. I notice that a lot of times they're afraid of asking questions. They don't want to look like they don't know everything, but it is common you don't know about the product. It makes sense you don't know about the process. It's okay to ask, and it's good to ask. You have to ask to understand, and it's for your own benefit. Sometimes I notice that especially the students newly come out of a master's degree, that they think they have mindset that they're supposed to know more than the workers. So they're afraid to ask questions, and they refuse to learn. I think those are things that will harm their careers. It's not good. So I always tell them, be humble. All those workers, they have been on the front line. They have been there for years. Their experience are invaluable. Everyone has to respect their experience and understand their experience. Then you can talk about, we can manage their work and make their work become better. Only when you understand why they're doing this, then you can have them listen to your suggestions. That's just my yeah.
Sorry, I was going to say, so it sounds like as if you're new going into any position, it doesn't matter what what age, but specifically for students, when you go into these new roles, don't be afraid to ask questions. If anything, it doesn't make you look silly. It makes you look like it doesn't look, but you're genuinely interested in what you are, and people recognize that in a positive light, not in the opposite light.
Yeah.
So we've talked about students who are going into their first roles. Could you give any advice to someone who is currently in school, maybe in their third or fourth year, and they want to eventually aspire to be in a position such as yours? What advice would you give them?
Learn accounting. That's the first advice. Everybody going to any industry and trying to be a manager and going to a senior position has to learn accounting. Spend some spare time when you have, read some basic accounting books, understand the accounting principles. Because in the industry, everything is about cost. Literally everything is about cost. You have to understand basic accounting to understand how the business is working. Everything is an accounting book. So even you are in a QA, QC position, you have to understand accounting to know why your proposal was rejected. Because I always told the students I met is that even we are in a QA, QC position, we're still a part of this business. It's business for profit. So if we are creating more cost than the benefit we are creating to the industry, to this business, then we are not helping. We are actually hurting the business. We have to understand that we are not against the sales team, not against the production team. We are the same team. We have to work with them. So by understanding of the accounting of the business, you know what are the material, what are the costs that come into the business, what are the income comes to the business. Then you know what are the budget we have, why we don't have the budget to test every day. And if we don't have the budget to test every day, what are the compromises we can do to achieve the same purpose? And it comes with a return that's acceptable for the business to be sustainable. So that's something I noticed a lot of food science background students fail to comprehend when they first come into the business. Because when we first learn, and my experience when I learned this food science back in UBC, that everything was created in the ideal world where you have unlimited resource to create a hazard plan. But in the real world, you don't. You have to deal with the budget you have in your apartment. And a lot of times the solid budget is non-negotiable. Then you have to plan ahead of where the expense is gonna be. You have to put your expense to the really critical control points instead of create the plan that is too rigorous than it need to be. So accounting is very important. Another thing is important for students. My suggestion to improve your sales skills. I know quality person and R&D person always think this is a technical position. You don't need to know about sales, but it's not the case. It's not about selling the product. You also need to sell your ideas, especially when you're in a management position. You have to sell your ideas to your peers, to your boss, to say, okay, this is my plan, and why this plan works. You have to convince them. And when you work at the QA position or QC position, you have to convince your coworker, the frontline workers, to listen to your suggestions, to follow the SOP. You have to convince them. We cannot just say, okay, this is the procedure, you have to do it. Then if we tell them to do that, they are being insulted. They wouldn't understand why they have to do it. You have to sell your ideas to them. So my suggestions to students are to understand the accounting side, the cost of the business, then improve your sales skills, improve your communication skills. That will help you a lot.
First one is a really unique piece of advice. I've never come across that. I would never associate accounting as a student. I wouldn't think that would be something that someone would suggest for me as someone going into the technical side, to do. So I think that's a really good piece of advice. If a student was to practice their accounting prior to graduating and they wanted to put it in their resume, would it be sufficient to maybe say you took courses at school, or what would be the best way to highlight that to differentiate yourself?
In the resume wise, you can mention about you took the course that helps, especially when you're applying for a position that needs to do some budget management. Say if you apply for QA manager position, usually the job will require some level of budget management of the department. And you mentioned that you have learned the knowledge of budget management. That will definitely help. It's more soft skills than certificates that you can put on a resume. It's more about when you actually get the job to do a job right. So, to be honest, I never thought of the question before how to present that in a resume, but it was definitely if you learn some accounting in a school or just doing some readings with spare time, it would definitely differentiate you from your peers when you're in the company. Because when you understand the accounting, when you talk, you will always have the cost, the formula in your brain. You know, then you will talk sense, right?
Right.
When you present idea, your other co-workers will understand. For example, when you're in a manager position, when you have a meeting, you won't be meeting with all the food scientists in the industry. You will be meeting with the head of the sales, the marketing, the marketer, the controller, the production manager. They all have different backgrounds, but the sales team knows accounting. The controller, the accountant, they knows accounting. The production guys, the operation guys, they all know accounting, and they are speaking the same language. If you don't know accounting, you are not speaking the same language with them.
That's a funny way of putting it, but I think that sounds about right.
Yeah.
So we're coming down to the end of our little session. So just before we wrap this up, is there anything else that you wanted to share, or if you have any other advice or something you'd like to share with the audience?
I think food industry is a very rewarding industry to start your career with. So for myself, when I was still a student in UBC, initially I was trying to get into a more technical position, into a lab or a R&D job, to use a more technical side of my education, my knowledge. But when I, for some reasons, I started doing a QA position in food industry, I start to move more towards the business side of the industry. I start to notice how much knowledge that you can learn from the day-to-day work. Just for my personal feelings, I think you can actually learn more by doing the industry side of the job than doing a lab work. Industry job is you have a lot of interhuman communications. That's where that really helps you as a person, to be honest. When I first graduated, I was more introvert. I had problem to even speak with people. If I had to go for a presentation, I would have my both hands shaking all the time. By working in industry, to talk with different people from the workers to say a customer, CFA inspector, all these practices help to build my confidence as a person. It really helps me to grow. So I think that's somewhere that this industry can be beneficial to a person. And the growth is very good if you really put your mind into it. It took me about 7 years from entry level position to right now I think it's a medium level. management position in the industry, and I still see a lot of potential of growth. This career is definitely rewarding, compensation-wise, life-wise. So yeah, I would recommend students to really think of going to the industry more, and they will find this industry is really worth inputting their life for, really worth commitment for.
I think that's a great story, Sean. I mean, it is an amazing industry where you can do so much growth and you can kind of expand yourself to different positions. And you're a prime example of that. And to hear for someone who was introverted in school to go to a management position and someone like operations whose job is on daily talking and being with other people and communicating, to hear that growth, it just goes to show there's so much that you can do if you put your mind to it, like someone like you. So thank you so much for taking the time to share with us your experiences, your advice, and a little bit more about how the industry for scallops goes. So I really appreciate this time. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. I have a lot of fun.
That was episode 3 of the Food Grads podcast. If you want to view any of my detailed show notes, then check out the podcast tab on the Food Grads website. And don't forget to sign up for your free Food Grads account, where you can see any new jobs tailored to students and new food graduates. As well, sign up for our newsletter and you can keep up to date with anything and everything Food Grads is doing. Nicole and I share some great information, including my food bite of the week. It's a place where I share something food related which is interesting to me. This might include something coming from my thesis, or just some general news that comes into the industry, or books that I'm enjoying. It's really a catch-all, but I just want to share it with people. Next week on the podcast, we interview Sean Xia, the Research and Development Packaging Lead at PepsiCo. This was a fun episode because I learned that Sean and I have some aspects of our career paths that are quite similar, actually. And one of the respects is how we got into our first co-op positions. Sean has a great attitude and shows the power of networking and reaching out for informational interviews. This is a great podcast if you're still a student and you're interested in knowing how to get a co-op position or get something right out of school. That's everything for today. I'll see you next week.